Captain Jake Morrison stared at the endless black of space through the bridge windows of the UES Defiance. The patrol ship moved quietly through the outer rim sectors, far from Earth and the busy trade routes. Jake had been doing these routine patrols for 3 years now, and they were usually boring. Nothing ever happened out here except broken-down cargo ships and the occasional pirate trying to hide from Earth's military. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Ben Rodriguez from his position at the communications station. The young engineer had joined Jake's crew 6 months ago, fresh from the academy. His fingers moved quickly over the controls as he tried to clean up the signal. Jake walked over to Ben's station and looked at the screen. Static filled most of the display, but there was definitely something there, a pattern hidden in the noise.
"What?
"Do you think it is?" Jake asked. "It looks like a distress signal, sir, but it's not using any Earth frequencies. The pattern is completely different from anything I've seen before."
Dr. Lisa Carter looked up from her medical reports at the science
station. She was the ship's doctor and had been with Jake longer than anyone else on the crew. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her green eyes showed concern. "Could it be pirates trying to trick us?" she asked. "They've used fake distress signals before." Jake nodded. That was always a possibility. Pirates were smart and would use any trick to lure military ships into traps. But something about this signal felt different. It was weak and desperate, not the strong, clear signal pirates usually used. "How far away is the source?" Jake asked Ben. "About 2 hours at full speed, sir. It's coming from the Kepler system." Jake knew that area. It was mostly empty space, with a few dead planets. No one lived there, and ships rarely traveled through it. It made the signal even more strange. "Sir, I should point out that our orders are to stay on Patrol Route 7, said Ensign Danny Walsh from the pilot's seat. He was the youngest member of the crew, only 22 years old, but he was a good pilot and followed orders perfectly. Jake stood quietly for a moment, thinking. Danny was right. Their orders were clear. They were supposed to stay on their assigned patrol route and report back to base in 6 hours. It's going to investigate the signal would mean breaking those orders. But Jake had joined Earth's military for one reason: to help people. If someone was really in trouble out there, he couldn't just ignore them. That wasn't what humans did. Earth's military had a saying: no one left behind. It didn't matter if they were human or alien, friend or enemy. Humans would try to give it. "Change course for the Kepler system," Jake ordered. "Full speed." "Yes, sir," Danny replied, and turned the ship toward the signal. The next 2 hours passed slowly. The distress signal got stronger as they got closer, but it was still unlike anything they had ever heard. Ben worked hard to translate it, but the language was completely unknown. "I think I've got something," Ben said finally. "The signal is definitely asking for help. I can't understand the words, but the pattern is clear. Someone is in serious trouble." When they reached the source of the signal, what they found shocked them all. A large alien ship floated dead in space, its hull torn open in several places. Strange symbols covered the ship's surface, and its design was unlike anything in Earth's databases. "My God," Lisa whispered. "I've never seen anything like it." The ship was beautiful even in its damaged state. It was long and curved, with smooth lines that seemed to flow like water. The metal was a deep blue color that seemed to glow with its own light, but the damage was severe. Large holes had been blasted through the hull, and pieces of the ship drifted nearby. "Are there any life signs?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her medical scanners. "I'm reading one very weak life sign. Whatever it is, it's dying." Jake made his decision. "Quickly, Ben, Danny, you're with me. Lisa, get your medical kit. We're going aboard." "Sir, we don't know anything about this ship or who built it," Danny said nervously. "It could be dangerous. Someone is dying over there," Jake replied. "We're going to help them." The four of them put on their spacesuits and crossed to the alien ship through the damaged hull. The inside was even more beautiful than the outside. The walls seemed to be made of the same glowing blue metal. Strange lights pulsed slowly along the corridors. But there were also signs of violence everywhere. Blast marks covered the walls, and pieces of equipment lay broken on the floor. This ship had been attacked, and the fight had been brutal. "This way," Lisa said, following her medical scanner. The life sign is coming from what looks like the main bridge. They made their way through the damaged corridors, their boots clanging on the metal floor. The ship's artificial gravity was still working, but the air was gone. Leaked out through the holes in the hull, the bridge was a disaster. Several bodies lay on the floor, clearly dead. They looked humanoid, but were taller and thinner than humans. With pale blue skin and large eyes, they wore what looked like military uniforms, but the design was elegant and flowing. It's very different from Earth's practical military gear. In the center of the bridge, chained to a chair, was another alien. This one was still alive, but barely. It was smaller than the others and wore different clothes. A long dress that might have been white but was now stained with blood. Heavy metal chains held it to the chair, and Jake could see that it had been badly hurt. "Lisa, get over here," Jake called. Lisa hurried over with her medical kit and began scanning the alien. "It's definitely alive, but just barely. I'm reading massive trauma and blood loss. I think it's female, based on the body structure." The alien's eyes opened slowly and focused on Jake. They were large and violet, filled with pain, but also intelligence. She tried to speak, but only a weak whisper came out. "Easy," Jake said gently. "We're here to help." The alien's eyes widened in surprise. She spoke again, a little stronger this time. The words were in the same strange language as the distress. Signal, but her tone was clearly grateful. "Ben, work on those chains," Jake ordered. "We need to get her free." As Ben worked on the locks, Lisa continued her medical scans. "Jake, I don't think I can treat her here. Her biology is completely different from humans. I need to get her back to our medical bay." The chains finally came free, and the alien woman nearly collapsed. Jake caught her and was surprised by how light she was. She couldn't weigh more than 90 pounds. "Can you walk?" he asked. She shook her head weakly and pointed to her legs. Jake could see that her left leg was badly injured, probably broken. "I'll carry you," he said. As they made their way back to the Defiance, Jake's mind was racing. Who was this alien who had attacked her ship? And why had they chained her up instead of just killing her? The answer came sooner than he expected. As soon as they got the alien woman to the medical bay, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. "Captain to the bridge." Danny's voice came over the intercom, tight with fear. "3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace. They're heading straight for us, and they look hostile." Jake looked down at the alien woman on the medical table. Her violet eyes met his, and he saw fear there. She spoke one word that he didn't need. A translator to understand. Krex. Jake had never heard that name before, but he knew what it meant. The aliens who had attacked this woman's ship were coming back to finish the job. And now Jake and his crew were standing in their way. "Lisa, do whatever you can for her," Jake said, heading for the bridge. "We're about to have company." Jake rushed onto the bridge and immediately saw the 3 ships on the main screen. They were ugly things, built for war instead of beauty. Their dark hulls were covered with weapons, and they moved through space like hungry sharks, looking for prey. "How big are they?" Jake asked Danny, who was still at the pilot controls. "Each one is twice our size, Captain, and they're armed with heavy weapons, way more than we can handle." Jake studied the enemy ships carefully. The Defiance was a patrol vessel, built for speed and exploration, not for fighting 3 warships. In a straight fight, they would lose quickly. "Are they trying to communicate?" Jake asked Ben. "Yes, sir. They're sending a message on multiple frequencies. I think I can translate it." The main screen flickered, and then a face appeared that made Jake's blood run cold. The alien was reptilian, with green, scaly skin and yellow eyes that held no warmth. Sharp teeth filled its mouth, and when it spoke, its voice was like gravel. "Human ship, you have something that belongs to us. Turn our prisoner and we will. Let you live, refuse, and we will destroy you." Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had seen bullies before, but this was different. This creature wasn't just threatening him and his crew. It wanted to take back the injured alien woman they had rescued, probably to hurt her more. "Open a channel," Jake told Ben. "Sir, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Defiance. We found a damaged vessel and rescued a survivor. We don't negotiate with pirates. The reptilian alien's eyes flashed with anger. I am Commander Vexther of the Krex Syndicate. The female is our property. She has information we need. Give her to us now, or face the consequences. Property. Jake's voice was cold. People aren't property. We don't hand over injured survivors to anyone. Vexther laughed, a horrible sound like breaking glass. You humans are so foolish. Your little ship cannot fight us. This is your last warning. Here's my answer, Jake said, and nodded to Ben, who cut the communication. Danny, get us out of here. Full speed toward the Kepler asteroid field. Sir, they'll follow us, Danny warned. That's what I'm counting on. Those big ships won't be able to follow us into the asteroids. We need to buy time. The Defiance shot forward just as the Krex ships opened fire. Energy beams lit up the space around them, but Danny's piloting skills kept them ahead of the weapons. The asteroid field was 20 minutes away at full speed, but Jake wasn't sure they had 20 minutes. Ben, go check on our guest. See if she can tell us anything useful about these Krex. Ben left his station and hurried to the medical bay. A few minutes later, he returned with surprising news. Captain, she's awake, and she speaks English. Sort of. Her ship's computer was teaching her human languages when they were attacked. Bring her to the bridge, Jake ordered. Sir, Dr. Carter says she shouldn't be moved. Her injuries are severe. Another blast shook the ship, and Jake made his decision. Bring her anyway. If we don't learn something about these Krex, we're all dead. A few minutes later, Ben and Lisa helped the alien woman onto the bridge. She was even more beautiful than Jake had realized, despite her injuries. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow with an inner light, and her violet eyes held intelligence and determination. She wore one of Lisa's spare uniforms, which was too big for her small frame. I am Princess Zarathal of the Volhari Empire, she said in accented but clear English. You saved my life. Why? Jake was surprised by the directness of her question. Because you needed help. That's what humans do. Even when it puts your own people in danger, especially then. Princess Zarathal stared at him with wonder. My people would have calculated the risk. They would have decided that saving one life was not worth endangering many. Oh, we're not your people, Jake said. Can you tell us about these Krex? What do they want with you? The princess's face grew dark. They captured my ship 3 days ago. They killed my guards and took me prisoner. They want information about my people's defenses and the location of our home world. Why? Because they have built a weapon, a terrible weapon, that can destroy entire star systems. They plan to use it to force all the civilized worlds to surrender to them. Jake felt his stomach drop. A weapon that could destroy star systems would make the Krex the most powerful force in the galaxy. No one would be able to stop them. Do you know about this weapon? Lisa asked. I saw it, the princess replied. Before they captured me, our intelligence networks learned of its location. I was carrying that information back to my people when the Krex attacked my ship. Where is this weapon? Jake asked. It moves through space on a mobile station. The station can shift in and out of normal space, making it almost impossible to attack. But I know its movement patterns. I can predict when and where it will appear. The ship shook again as more Krex weapons hit their shields. Danny called. From the pilot's seat, Captain, we're almost to the asteroid field, but our shields are down to 60%. Good. Take us deep into the field. Find the biggest asteroids you can. As they entered the asteroid field, the Krex ships slowed down. The big warships couldn't move as easily between the floating rocks as the smaller Defiance could. They're hanging back, Ben reported. Looks like they're sending smaller fighters after us. How many? I count 12 fighters, sir. Fast and heavily armed? Jake thought quickly. 12 fighters were still more than they could handle, but at least they were smaller targets. In the asteroid field, the Defiance might have a chance. Danny, use the asteroids as cover. Make them come to us one at a time. What followed was the most intense hour of Jake's military career. Danny flew the Defiance through the asteroid field, like it was a racecourse. using the floating rocks to block enemy fire and split up the attacking fighters. Princess Zarathal watched in amazement as the human crew worked together. Lisa monitored their shields and weapons, calling out damage reports and coordinating repairs. Ben managed communications and sensors, tracking enemy movements and jamming their targeting systems. Danny flew with skill that bordered on madness, threading the ship through gaps that seemed too small for it to fit, and Jake commanded them all, making split-second decisions that kept them alive. When 3 fighters cornered them near a large asteroid, he ordered Danny to fly straight at the rock, then pull up at the last second. 2 of the fighters crashed into the asteroid, and the third was destroyed by the Defiance's weapons. "How do you do this?" Princess Zarathal asked during a brief quiet moment. "Your ship is smaller and weaker than theirs, but you're winning." "We don't fight fair," Jake replied with a grin. "We fight smart." But their luck couldn't last forever. A lucky shot from one of the remaining fighters hit their main engine, and the Defiance began losing power. "Engines damaged," Danny reported. "We're losing speed and maneuverability." The surviving Krex fighters sensed weakness and closed in for the kill. Jake watched them approach and made a desperate decision. Danny set course for that big asteroid at bearing 270, the one with all the metal in it. That will take us away from the exit. We'll be trapped, trust me. As the Defiance limped toward the metallic asteroid, the Krex fighters followed, sensing an easy victory. But Jake had noticed something about the asteroid that they had missed. "Ben, send a focus sensor pulse at that asteroid. Maximum power, sir. That will overload our sensors and blind us for several minutes." "Do it." The sensor pulse hit the asteroid and something wonderful happened. The metal in the rock created a feedback loop that sent the pulse bouncing around the asteroid field like a pinball. The electromagnetic pulse fried the electronics of every Krex fighter within range. "Their fighters are dead in space," Ben reported with excitement. "The pulse knocked out their systems. And ours?" Jake asked. "We're okay. Our systems are shielded better than theirs." Princess Zarathal stared at Jake with new respect. "You used the asteroid's metal content to create an electromagnetic weapon. That was brilliant. We learned a long time ago that sometimes the best weapon is the one your enemy doesn't see coming." But their celebration was short-lived. The 3 Krex warships had moved closer to the asteroid field and were beginning to enter it, moving slowly but steadily toward the Defiance. "They're not giving up," Lisa observed. "Neither are we," Jake replied. "Princess, you said you know where this super weapon is located?" "Yes. It will appear in the Centauri system in 4 days. That's when it will be vulnerable to attack. Then that's where we're going. But first, we need to get out of here." Jake studied the tactical display, looking for an escape route. Krex ships were spread out, trying to cover all possible exits from the asteroid field. It looked impossible. "Danny, can you get us to the far side of the field without being detected? Maybe if we shut down all non-essential systems and drift with the asteroids? It would take several hours and we'd be sitting ducks if they'd spot us." "Do it? And Princess," as Captain Morrison, "I hope you're ready for a long trip, because we're going to stop this weapon and you're going to help us do it." Princess Zarathal looked at the determined faces around her and felt something she hadn't felt since her capture. Hope. These humans were crazy enough to take on impossible odds, and somehow, that made her believe they might actually succeed. The Defiance drifted silently through the asteroid field for 6 hours, all systems powered down except for life support. Jake and his crew waited in the dark, listening to the ship creak around them as it slowly cooled. Through the small windows, they could see the lights of Krex ships searching between the asteroids. Princess Zarathal sat quietly in the corner of the bridge, watching the humans work. Even in this dangerous situation, they stayed calm and focused. She had never seen anything like it among her own people. "How much longer?" Jake whispered to Danny. 2 more hours to reach the edge of the field, sir. But there's a problem." "Kind of problem?" Danny pointed to his instruments. "The Krex are setting up a blockade at all the exit points. They're not leaving. They plan to wait us out." Jake frowned. The Defiance couldn't stay powered down forever. Eventually, their life support would fail, or the Krex would get lucky and spot them. They needed another option. Princess, Jake said quietly, does your ship have any technology that might help us? Zerothel shook her head sadly. My ship is destroyed, but I do have this. She pulled a small device from her pocket. It was no bigger than Jake's thumb and glowed with soft blue light. What is it? A data crystal? It contains all the information about the Krek's weapon, including its location and weaknesses. But it also has something else. Emergency protocols for Velhari ships. Lisa looked up from her medical station. What kind of protocols? Have a Velhari? Ship is in danger. It can send out a special signal. Any Velhari vessel within range will come to help, no matter the risk. Jake felt a spark of hope. Are there any Velhari ships nearby? I don't know. My people rarely travel to this part of space. But if there are any within 100 light years, they will hear the signal and come. How long would it take them to get here? Anywhere from a few hours to several days, depending on their location. Jake made his decision. Send the signal.
Zarathal
hesitated. Captain Morrison, if I send this signal, any Velhari ship that comes will be walking into a trap. The Kreks will destroy them. Maybe they'll see the Krek ships and stay away until they can bring help. And if they don't, Jake met her eyes steadily. Then we'll do everything we can to protect them, just like we're protecting you. Princess stared at him for a long moment, then activated the device. A pulse of blue light flashed through the ship, and then everything was quiet again. Signal sent, she said. Now we wait and see if anyone heard it. The waiting was the hardest part. For 12 hours, they drifted through the asteroid field while the Krek ships maintained their blockade. Jake's crew took turns sleeping and eating cold rations. Princess Zarathel spent most of the time talking quietly with Lisa, learning about human culture and medicine. Your people are very different from mine, she told Lisa during one of their conversations. The Velhari have advanced technology and long lives, but we have become careful. We avoid risks. We calculate everything before we act. That doesn't sound so bad, Lisa replied. Planning is important. Yes. But sometimes planning isn't enough. Yes. Sometimes you have to act from the heart, like Captain Morrison did when he rescued me. My people would have done a cost-benefit analysis first. Jake overheard their conversation and walked over. Maybe that's why the Kreks were able to capture you. They knew your people would be predictable. Zarathal nodded sadly. You're probably right. The Kreks have been attacking the outer worlds for years, but we always responded the same way. Send diplomats. Try to negotiate. Offer them what they wanted if they would just leave us alone. And that didn't work. It only made them bolder. They learned that we would not fight, no matter what they did. So they kept taking more and more. Ben looked up from his sensor station. Captain, I'm picking up something. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Jake hurried to Ben's station and looked at the readings. Krek ships? No, sir. The energy signatures are completely different. They might be Velhari. Princess Zarathal gasped and rushed to look at the sensor data. Yes, those are my people. It's a military patrol, probably from the Outer Defense Fleet. Are they strong enough to fight the Kreks? Zarutho's face fell. No. 3 ships against the Kreks warships. They'll be destroyed. Jake watched the tactical display as the new ships moved toward the asteroid field. The Kreks had spotted them too and were moving to intercept. In a few minutes, there would be a battle, and the Velhari ships would be outnumbered. We have to help them, Jake said. Sir, our weapons are damaged, and our engines are running at half power, Danny pointed out. What can we do? Jake studied the display, thinking hard. The Krek ships were moving to surround the Velhari vessels, using their superior numbers to win quickly. But they were also moving away from the asteroid field, which gave Jake an idea. Danny, can you get us to that position? He pointed to a spot on the display between the Krek ships and the exit from the asteroid field. Yes, but sir, that would put us right in the middle of the battle. That's the idea. Princess, does your data crystal have technical specifications for Krek ships? Yes, complete blueprints. Why? Because I think I know their weakness. Jake quickly explained his plan. It was dangerous and required perfect timing, but it might work. The Krek ships were powerful, but they were also old designs that relied on heavy armor and weapons. They were built to fight other warships, not to deal with unconventional tactics. Ben, I need you to analyze the Krek shield frequencies. Look for gaps or weak spots. Already on it, sir. The battle began as the Defiance powered up and moved. Out of the asteroid field, the Velhari ships were fighting bravely but were clearly outmatched. Their elegant vessels were designed for exploration and diplomacy, not warfare. There, Ben said excitedly. The Krek shields have a rotation frequency. Every 30 seconds, there's a 2-second gap in their rear coverage. Danny, get us behind the lead Krek ship. Use the asteroids as cover. What about their weapons? They won't expect us to attack. They think we're running away. The Defiance shot out of the asteroid field and curved around behind the largest Krek's warship. Just as Ben had predicted, there was a brief moment when the ship's rear shields were down. Fire everything we have, Jake ordered. Their weapons weren't powerful enough to destroy the Krek ship, but they didn't need to. Jake had studied the blueprints and found the perfect target, the main power coupling that fed energy to the ship's weapon systems. The Defiance's attack hit exactly where Jake aimed. The Krek ship's weapons went offline and it began drifting, powerless. One down, Jake said with satisfaction, but their attack had revealed their position. The other 2 Krek ships turned toward them, angry and ready for revenge. Incoming missiles, Ben warned. Danny, evasive maneuvers. Princess, can your people help us? Zerothal was already working with the communication system. I've told them about the shield weakness. They're moving to attack. What followed was unlike any battle Jake had ever seen. The Velhari ships, once they understood the Krek's vulnerability, fought with precise coordination. They used their superior speed and maneuverability to stay behind the Krek ships, hitting them during the brief shield gaps. But the Defiance was still in serious danger. One of the Krek ships was focusing all its attention on them, and their damaged systems couldn't take much more punishment. Shields at 20%, Lisa reported. Hull breach on Deck 3, Ben added. Jake watched the tactical display and saw their chance. The damaged Krek's ship was drifting toward a large asteroid, its crew probably trying to restart their power systems. Danny, full speed toward that asteroid. The one that damaged Krek's ship is near. Sir, that's taking us closer to the enemy. Trust me. As they approached the asteroid, Jake waited for the perfect moment. The Krek ship was using its backup thrusters to try to avoid hitting the rock, but they were moving slowly and predictably. Now, Danny, put us right between the Krek ship and the asteroid. The Defiance slipped into the narrow space, just as the Krek ship fired its thrusters at full power. The thruster exhaust hit the asteroid and bounced back, creating a cloud of superheated gas and debris that engulfed the Krek's vessel. Their hull is breaching, Ben reported with excitement. The thermal shock is tearing their ship apart. 2 down, Jake said. The last Krek's ship, seeing its companions destroyed, decided to retreat. It jumped to hyperspace, leaving the humans. And Velhari alone in the asteroid field? Princess Zarathal stared at Jake with amazement. You did it. You actually did it. 3 human ships defeated 6 Krek's warships. We had help, Jake replied modestly. No, Captain Morrison. You had courage, and you had something my people have forgotten how to use. What's that? It's the willingness to take risks to protect others. The Velhari ships came here because of duty, but you fought because it was the right thing to do. The Velhari ships approached the Defiance, and soon Jake was talking to their commander, Admiral Kethfer. The tall, elegant alien listened carefully. As Princess Zarathal explained about the Krek superweapon and the information she carried, this weapon must be stopped, the Admiral said in perfect English. Princess, you must return to the homeworld immediately with this information. No, Zeruthal said firmly. I'm going with Captain Morrison to destroy the weapon. Princess, that is far too dangerous. The small fleet traveled through hyperspace for 2 days, racing toward the Centauri system where the Krek's superweapon would appear. Jake spent most of the time studying the weapon's blueprints with Princess Zarathal, looking for any weakness they could exploit. The weapon was enormous, built inside a space station the size of a small moon. It could move in and out of normal space using advanced technology that even the Velhari didn't fully understand. When it fired, it created a chain reaction that could destroy entire star systems. The weapon needs 24 hours to charge. Between shots, Zarathal explained as they looked at the technical data. During that time, it has to stay in normal space. That's when it's vulnerable. How vulnerable? Jake asked. The charging process creates massive energy buildup. If that energy could be redirected back into the weapon itself, it would destroy the entire station. Jake studied the blueprints more carefully. Where would we need to plant the charges? The main reactor core. But Captain, the core is in the center of the station, protected by hundreds of Krek soldiers and automated defenses. Getting there would be almost impossible. Almost impossible isn't the same as impossible, Jake replied. We just need to find the right approach. Admiral Kethver joined them in the planning session. The Velhari officer had been skeptical of the mission from the beginning, but he was starting to understand why Princess Zarathal had such faith in the humans. Even if you could reach the reactor core, the Admiral said, how would you escape? Explosion would destroy everything. Within 1,000 kilometers, Jake looked at his crew members who had gathered around the planning table. Danny, Ben, and Lisa all met his eyes with quiet determination. They all knew what he was thinking. We wouldn't escape, Jake said simply. This would be a one-way mission. Zarathal said immediately, I won't let you sacrifice yourselves. There has to be another way. Princess, look at the numbers. The weapon will be ready to fire in 3 days. If we don't stop it, billions of people will die. Our 4 lives against billions? That's not even a choice. Lisa spoke up from her position at the medical station. Captain, I didn't join Earth's military to live a long, safe life. I joined to help people. This is how I can help the most. People, then I'm ready. Ben nodded agreement. My family lives on Earth. If this weapon isn't stopped, they'll be next on the Krek's target list. I'd rather die fighting than let that happen. Danny, the youngest member of the crew, took a deep breath. I'm scared, he admitted. But I'm more scared of what happens if we don't try. Zarathal looked around at the human faces and felt tears in her violet eyes. She had spent her whole life among people who calculated risks and avoided danger, but these humans were willing to die for people they had never met, just because it was the right thing to do. Then I'm going with you, she said firmly. Absolutely not, Jake replied. You're a princess. Your people need you alive. My people need to learn what I've learned from you. They need to understand that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when the odds are terrible. It's the only way I can teach them that is by showing them. Admiral Kethver looked horrified. Princess, I cannot allow this. I have orders to protect you. Admiral, I'm giving you new orders. Help us stop this weapon. It's more important than my safety. The argument continued for hours, but in the end, Jake realized that Zarathal was right. The mission would need someone who understood both human tactics and Velhari technology. Without her knowledge, they probably wouldn't succeed. All right, he said finally. But we do this my way. When I give an order, you follow it without question. Understood, Captain? They spent the rest of the journey planning every detail of the mission. The Krek's weapon station would appear in the Centauri system in exactly 18 hours. They would have a narrow window to attack before it could charge up and fire on its first target. When they reached Centauri, they found the system empty, except for a few dead planets and scattered asteroids. According to Zarathal's calculations, the weapon station would appear near the largest planet, using its gravity to help stabilize the charging process. There, Ben said, pointing at his sensors. Something's coming out of hyperspace. The weapon station materialized slowly, like a ghost becoming solid. It was even more massive than the blueprints had suggested, a dark metal mountain floating in space. Weapons covered its surface, and Jake could see dozens of smaller ships patrolling around it. Energy readings are off the charts, Lisa reported.
Aye!
The weapon is already starting to charge. How long do we have? Jake asked. 22 hours, until it's ready to fire. Jake turned to Admiral Kethver. Admiral, I need your ships to create a distraction. Draw off as many of the patrol ships as you can. What about the station's defenses? Leave those to us. The Defiance is small enough to slip through their sensor grid if we're careful. The Velhari ships moved off to begin their attack on the patrol fleet, while the Defiance approached the weapons station from below, using the planet's gravity shadow to hide their approach. I'm reading massive energy signatures from the station, Ben reported. The weapon is definitely charging, but there's something else. I think they're also charging up a defensive shield. How long until the shield is active? Jake asked. Maybe 6 hours. That meant they had to get inside the station before the shields came up, or they would never get another chance. Denny, take us in, nice and easy. The Defiance crept toward the weapons station, moving slowly to avoid detection. Jake watched the patrol ships fighting with the Velhari vessels in the distance. Grateful that Admiral Kethfer was keeping them busy, they found a docking bay on the station's lower section that seemed to be empty. Danny managed to slip the ship inside without triggering any alarms. So far so good, Jake said. Now comes the hard part. They had studied the station's layout and found a route to the reactor core that avoided most of the heavily guarded areas. It would take them through maintenance tunnels and abandoned sections of the station.
Jake, Zerothal, Ben, and Lisa put on their gear and prepared to leave the ship. Donnie would stay behind to monitor communications and be ready for a quick escape.
If needed, remember, Jake told his team, we only have one shot at this. Once we plant the charges, we have exactly 10 minutes to get back to the ship. They made their way through the station's corridors, following the route they had memorized. The Kreks had built the station for function, not beauty. Everything was dark metal and harsh lighting designed to intimidate anyone who saw it. Way, Zarathal whispered, leading them down a maintenance tunnel that ran parallel to the main corridors. They had been moving for 30 minutes when they encountered their first patrol. 3 Krek soldiers were walking down the corridor they needed to cross. Jake signaled for everyone to wait while he studied the situation. The soldiers were armed with heavy weapons and looked alert. A direct fight would bring more enemies running.
I
have an idea, Ben whispered. He pulled out a small device from his toolkit. If I can create a distraction in the next section, they'll go investigate. Do it, Jake agreed. Ben worked quickly with his electronics, and a few minutes later, an alarm started sounding 3 corridors away. The Krek soldiers ran toward the noise, leaving their path clear. Nice work, Jake said as they crossed the corridor. They continued deeper into the station, avoiding patrols and security cameras. Zarathel's knowledge of Velhari technology helped them understand the station's systems. How Jake's military training kept them from being detected. Finally, they reached the reactor core. It was a massive chamber filled with machinery that hummed with dangerous energy. At the center was the reactor itself, a sphere of metal and crystal that pulsed with bright light. There, Zarathel pointed to a control panel near the reactor. If we can overload the safety systems and plant charges on the primary power couplings, the reactor will go critical. Jake and Ben began placing the explosive charges while Lisa and Zarathal worked on the control systems. Everything was going according to plan until footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Someone's coming, Lisa whispered. The footsteps got closer, and then the door to the reactor chamber slid open. Commander Vexther stepped inside, flanked by 6 heavily armed soldiers. Well, well, the reptilian alien said with a cold smile. The little human heroes have come to save the galaxy. How touching. Jake slowly stood up, his hand moving toward his weapon. Let my people go, Vexther. Your fight is with me. My fight is with anyone who threatens Krek's power. Did you really? Think you could sneak aboard my station without being detected? Actually, yes, Jake replied. Your security is pretty terrible. Vexter's smile vanished. You will watch as I torture your friends to death. Then you will tell me everything you know about human military capabilities. Here's what I know, Jake said, and suddenly lunged forward. The fight that followed was desperate and brutal. Tackled Vexther, while Ben and Lisa fought the Krek soldiers. Zarathal continued working on the control panel, knowing that stopping the weapon was more important than the battle. Jake was bigger and stronger than the reptilian commander. But Vexther had claws and sharp teeth. They rolled across the floor, each trying to gain the advantage. Got it, Zarathel called out. The safety systems are down. Jake stood alone in the reactor chamber, watching the countdown timer on the explosive charges. 7 minutes until detonation. The charges would destroy the reactor and turn the entire weapon station into a massive bomb. But first, he had to make sure no one could stop it. Krex soldiers poured into the chamber, their weapons pointed at Jake. Behind them came Commander Vexter, his reptilian face twisted with rage. "Surrender now, human, and I might let your friends live," Vexter hissed. "My friends are already gone," Jake replied calmly. "And in 6 minutes, your super weapon will be nothing but space dust." Vexter looked at the timer and his yellow eyes widened with understanding. "Impossible. The reactor has safety systems it cannot overload." "Had safety systems," Jake corrected. "Princess Zarathal is smarter than you thought." The Krex commander roared with fury and ordered his soldiers to disarm the charges, but Jake was ready for them. He had positioned himself between the explosives and the enemy, and he wasn't going to move. The first soldier who tried to reach the charges found himself facing a very angry human. Jake had learned to fight in Earth's military, where survival often depended on being tougher and more determined than the enemy. The Krex soldier was bigger and stronger, but Jake fought with the desperation of someone who knew that billions of lives depended on him. Jake grabbed a piece of broken machinery and used it as a weapon, striking down the soldier before turning to face the next one. Each second he bought was another second closer to the reactor's destruction. Meanwhile, Princess Zarathal, Ben, and Lisa were making their way through the maintenance tunnels toward the docking bay where Danny waited with the Defiance. The princess had tears streaming down her face as they ran. "We have to go back for him," she said between gasps. "Jake's orders were clear," Ben replied, though his own voice was thick with emotion. "We get out of here and make sure his sacrifice means something." "He's buying us time," Lisa added. "If we go back, we'll just get caught too, and then no one will be left to tell the galaxy what happened here." They reached the docking bay just as alarms began sounding throughout the station. Danny had the Defiance ready for immediate departure, engines warming, and weapons charged. "Where's the captain?" Danny asked as they climbed aboard. "He stayed behind," Ben said quietly. "Someone had to make sure the charges went off." Danny's face went pale, but he nodded and began the launch sequence. "Then we better make sure we're far enough away when this place explodes." Back in the reactor chamber, Jake was still fighting. 4 Krex soldiers lay unconscious or dead around him, but more kept coming. Vexter had given up trying to disarm the charges and was now focused on killing the human who had ruined his plans. "You cannot win, human," the commander snarled as he advanced with his claws extended. "Even if you destroy this weapon, the Krex have others. We will still conquer the galaxy." "Maybe," Jake replied, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "But you won't be around to see it." The timer showed 3 minutes remaining. Jake and Vexter circled each other like ancient gladiators. The reptilian alien was faster and had natural weapons. But Jake had something more important. He was fighting for something bigger than himself. The final battle was quick and brutal. Vexter lunged forward with his claws, trying to tear Jake's throat out. But Jake ducked under the attack and grabbed the commander around the waist. Lifting him off the ground in a wrestling move he had learned in basic training, they crashed into a bank of computer equipment, sparks flying around them. Vexter's claws raked across Jake's back, leaving deep cuts, but the human refused to let go. With his last bit of strength, Jake slammed the Krex commander into the reactor control panel. The impact killed Vexter instantly, but it also damaged the control panel. Warning lights began flashing, and a computerized voice announced that the reactor was going into emergency shutdown. "No," Jake gasped, realizing what was happening. If the reactor shut down, the charges wouldn't be enough to destroy the weapon station. The mission would fail. With blood running down his back, Jake pulled himself over to the control panel. His vision was getting blurry, but he could see the override switch that would prevent the shutdown. It was protected by a clear cover that required 2 hands to open. The timer showed 1 minute remaining. Jake's left arm was badly injured from the fight, but he forced both hands to work together. The cover clicked open, revealing a simple red button marked with Krex symbols. Even though he couldn't read the alien writing, Jake knew this was what he needed. He pressed the button. The reactor's emergency shutdown stopped, and the warning lights changed from red to yellow. The charges would work now, but Jake wouldn't have time to escape. He was too badly hurt to move. The docking bay was too far away. The timer showed 30 seconds. Jake pulled out his communication device and opened a channel to the Defiance. "Danny, are you clear of the station?" "Yes, sir."
What?
"We're at safe distance." "Good. Tell Princess Zarathel that it's been an honor serving with her. Tell my crew that I'm proud of them." "Captain, there has to be a way." "No, Danny. Take care of the princess. Help her teach her people what she learned from us." Jake closed the communication channel and sat down with his back against the reactor. The pulsing light from the massive machine painted strange shadows on the walls around him. 10 seconds. Jake thought about his family back on Earth, and about all the people throughout the galaxy who would live because of what they had done here today. He thought about Princess Zarathal and how she had changed from a frightened captive into a brave warrior willing to fight for what was right. 5 seconds. "No one left behind," Jake whispered, repeating Earth's military motto. Mission accomplished. The charges exploded. The reactor overload created a chain reaction that tore through the weapon station like a giant fist. In seconds, the massive structure that had threatened to destroy entire star systems was nothing but expanding gas and twisted metal. Aboard the Defiance, Princess Zarathal watched the explosion through the view screen. The light was so bright it hurt to look at, but she couldn't turn away. She was watching the death of a hero. "He did it," Danny said quietly. "The weapon is completely destroyed." "At what cost?" Lisa asked, tears running down her face. "At the cost it always takes to stop evil," Zarathal replied. Captain Morrison understood that some things are worth dying for. The Volhari ships approached the Defiance, and Admiral Kethfer's voice came over the communication system. "Princess, our sensors confirm that the weapon station has been completely destroyed. The threat is over." "Yes, Admiral, the threat is over. But we have learned something important today." "What is that, Princess?" "We have learned that there are people in this galaxy who will fight and die to protect others, even strangers they have never met. We have learned what courage really means." 6 months later, Princess Zarathal stood before the Galactic Council on the neutral world of Centauri. Prime. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to hear her testimony about the destruction of the Krek superweapon. "The humans saved us all," she told the assembled delegates. 4 people in one small ship defeated an enemy that threatened the entire galaxy.
Ow.
They did this not for reward or glory, but because it was the right thing to do. The council chamber was silent as she continued. "My people, the Velhari, have always believed that wisdom comes from careful thought and planning. But Captain Jake Morrison and his crew taught me that sometimes wisdom means acting from the heart. Even when the odds are impossible, the Earth." Representative Ambassador Carol Stevens listened with pride as the princess spoke. Humanity had been a minor power in galactic politics, but that was about to change. "I propose that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council," Princess Zarathal announced. "They have proven themselves worthy allies and defenders of justice." The vote was unanimous. Later, Princess Zarathal traveled to Earth to meet with Jake's family. She found them in a small town in the American Midwest, simple people who had raised a son willing to die for strangers. "Your son saved billions of lives," she told Jake's parents. "He will be remembered as a hero throughout the galaxy." Jake's mother, a kind woman with graying hair, smiled through her tears. Jake always said that helping people was what mattered most. "I'm glad he was able to help so many." The princess gave them a piece of metal from the Defiance's hull, recovered from the wreckage of the weapon station. It was twisted and blackened, but it still bore the ship's name and Earth's flag. "This is so you'll remember that your son's sacrifice changed everything," she said. "Because of him, humans and aliens will work together to build a better galaxy." Before leaving Earth, Princess Zarathal visited the space memorial where Jake and his crew were honored alongside other human heroes. She placed a wreath made from flowers that grew on her homeworld, flowers that bloomed only in the presence of great courage. As she stood before the memorial, She spoke the words that had become the motto of the new Human Velhari Alliance. No one left behind. No evil unchallenged. No hope abandoned. The story of Captain Jake Morrison and the Defiance spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring other species to examine their own capacity for heroism. The Krex Syndicate, demoralized by the loss of their superweapon and their leader, began to collapse as their subject worlds rebelled.